In 2021, Lynn Painter released the world-renowned, award-winning, movie-adapting Better Than the Movies, the YA rom-com that changed the genre forever. So why are we still reading the YA romance? How is this different compared to the slew of YA romance books that exist in the genre? What makes it different? What's missing? What did Lynn Painter bring to the table that has me collecting her entire body of work like a madman? Let's get into it. If you don't know me, I'm Grace, and I am a massive reader, fangirl, TikToker, book talker, booktuber, all of the platforms. And I'm a college student, and I am so excited to be talking today about the YA romance genre, something that I am a little bit gifted in, considering that I am 20 years old and I still read books about 15-year-olds falling in love for the first time because it is magical. And I remember what it is like to be 15, and a pinch of stupid goes a long way when it comes to a high school romance. What's missing from the YA genre is a classic predictability. Everyone thinks that they need to reset the wheel. Every book needs to be different from anything published before. That's how people think you're supposed to stand out as an author in the romance industry. And since a writer myself, I have heard this story 1,000 times. Every agent says, I want something fresh. I want something exactly like this movie, but a little bit different. And I want a fresh spin on it. And so you get it ingrained in your mind that it can't be similar to anything else, that you need to be different. But the problem is that the printing press was invented in the 1500s. So there's been a lot of change since then, and it's really, really hard to find an exactly new book, an exactly new take that's not similar to anything else. Because she started with Better Than the Movies, which is a classic fake dating trope. And tropes get a bad rap online. I'm not gonna lie, they do, because people think if it's a trope, then it's predictable. If it's predictable, then it's not original. And if it's not original, especially if you're a female author, because people will be harder on you than pretty much anybody else, why should we read your book? What makes it different and modern if you're exactly like everybody else? And I'm always reminded of 2000s movies in this case, specifically movies like Clueless, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, recent adaptations of Pride and Prejudice, The Princess Diaries, Ice Princess. Those tend to follow a pattern. We have a lead actress, normally in most of the 2000s rom-coms like Devil Wears Prada, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. She's in some kind of marketing communications role. She lives in a big city. She has all these outfits. She lives in an exorbitantly expensive apartment, apparently by herself, or with her boyfriend, who's a little bit, of a scumbag, and she could do better. But then she meets the guy that she's not really supposed to know. She's not really supposed to be with him. He's a little bit of a bad boy, like in Hitch. And then there's a secret that he keeps from her, or she keeps from him, or they keep from each other. And then their best friends also are repeated, influences in the film, usually with a sense of humor and a defined ethnicity that will be repeated in these 2000s rom-coms. It's known as a token character for a reason. And then there's a big confession and a grand gesture, and usually a song playing in the background, followed by a big event where she wears a fancy ball gown and he wears a suit, and he sees her and he realizes that he's in love with her, and he tells her, and there's rain, and they're kissing, and then there's an end credits scene with a funky title sequence showing the city from above. And the difference there is that it's predictable and it's cozy. And cozy is another influence in the last 6 years. I think part of it has to do with COVID, to be honest. Ever since COVID, I think the world has just wanted something cozy, and we've wanted something light and breezy. We love cozy video games, vlogs about, just an aesthetic quiet day at home where I make some coffee and I go to see my friends. Soothing lo-fi music while you study. And so there's this magic cocktail of 2000s movies predictability, tropes becoming comforting rather than working against you in the genre, and then we also have the rise of book talk becoming popular yet again, and specifically with teenagers on TikTok. In 2020, right as the coziness was vibing, right? We're making our cocktail of magic wonderlands that Lynn Painter will then insert herself into, okay? Right in 2020, when the print publishing industry was expected to go down and down as people got ebooks and Kindles, what did we see instead? We saw a massive rise in the print industry. It went that way, somewhere up there, okay, with all the all-stars. And that was because of TikTok. TikTok bursted onto the scene in 2020. And with the dancing videos also came a lot of book videos. And people were sharing what they were reading, what they were ordering, because we had literally nothing else to do. And then people started gearing trends towards that. Publishers started paying attention to the fact that there were millions of people sharing recommendations and forming this community outside of the publishing industry. They were defining what they wanted themselves. And what the people want is cozy. The people want predictability. They want something where when they read an author, they know that they are going to like all of her other books because they are just similar enough to be comforting, where you can turn your brain off. And then in 2021, Better Than the Movies, Lynn Painter's magical book that became the bestseller that everyone knows her for, came onto the shelves, all right? And we were reading it. We were loving it. And it centers Wes and Liz. And it is the classic fake dating trope, all right? How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, fake dating. Hitch had some fake dating in it. You're going to pretend something, but it's not exactly true, but you need it to be true, and then in the process, you develop real feelings for that person. And while it would never work in real life, obviously, we eat it up in the rom-coms and the romance books every time. And then Lynn Painter puts a little spin on it. Is why didn't To All the Boys I Loved Before become part of this cultural phenomenon? And in a way it is, but we needed something new to come onto the scene right as the 2020s coziness was peaking and the 2000s were spiking in popularity again with the Y2K fashion, with the media. Also came a want, a need, in a sense, for the 2000s predictability of rom-coms. People miss that. And here we are, the perfect trifecta with Lynn Painter's new books coming into play. I'll read you the back right now. Carrie Winfrey, author of Waiting for Tom Hanks, says a sweet and funny love letter to romantic comedies, perfect for anyone who wishes their life had a film-worthy soundtrack, a quirky wardrobe, and a memorable meet-cute. And that's also part of what sets this book apart, that I know that Lynn Painter knew exactly what she was doing, because this book purposely brings out quotes from Bridget Jones, Harry and Sally, Tom Hanks, You've Got Mail, and it mentions these 2000s rom-coms that I know she knew people were loving and wanting more of and wanting similar themes and a similar approach. And I knew she knew that, and it is so smart and creative for authors to be doing that intentionally, rather than just being like, I have to be completely different than everyone else. This needs to reinvent the wheel with every single book. Every book needs to be different. I need to experiment, or I need to write exactly the same thing. Liz Buxbaum has always known that Wes Bennett was not boyfriend material. You would think that our next door neighbor would be a prime candidate for her romantic comedy fantasies, but Wes has only proven himself to be a pain in the butt. Ever since they were little, Wes was the kid who put a frog in her Barbie dream house. How dare you disrespect the Barbie dream house? The monster who hid a lawn gnome's severed head in her little homemade neighborhood book exchange. Flash forward 10 years from the Great Gnome Decapitation. It's Liz's senior year of high school, a time meant to be rife with milestones perfect for any big screen, and she needs Wes's help. See, Liz's forever crush Michael has just moved back to town, and, horribly, annoyingly, he's hitting it off with Wes. Meaning that if Liz wants Michael to finally notice her and hopefully be her prom date, she needs Wes. He's her in. But as Liz and Wes scheme to get Liz her magic prom moment, she's shocked to discover that she actually likes being around Wes. And as they continue to grow closer, she must re-examine everything she thought she knew about love and rethink her own perception of what happily ever after should really look like. Every time I'm on Pinterest, all I see are Wes and Liz quotes, she isn't you, taglines, tote bags, t-shirts. It's everywhere. And the direct tie to 2000s movies, it's just perfect. And it makes it very addictive, very collectible. It kind of commodifies Lynn Painter's books in a way that a lot of authors don't quite have down yet in today's industry. In 2022, Lynn Painter published The Do-Over, which is kind of like Groundhog Day. It's like a time loop where you're reliving the same day over and over again. Again, classic trope that people find very comforting. After living through a dumpster fire of a Valentine's Day, Emily Hornby escapes to her grandmother's house for some much-needed girl talk and companionship. There, Emily passes out on the couch, but when she wakes up, she's back home in her own bed. That's not the only shocker, though. Sometimes it's Valentine's Day. Somehow, again. And the next day, another disaster V-Day. It seems that Emily is stuck in some sort of time loop nightmare that she can't wake up from as she rewatches her boyfriend, Josh, cheat on her day after day. In addition to Josh's recurring infidelity, Emily can't get away from the enigmatic Nick, whom she keeps running into, sometimes literally, in unfortunate ways. How many days can one girl spend passively watching her life go up in flames? And when something good starts to come out of these terrible days, what happens when the universe stops doling out do-overs? And I love the do-over because not only does it have one of the cutest rooftop kiss scenes I've ever read, but it talks a lot about grief as well. Because the main character, her love interest, has a big point of grief in his life. And I won't give you spoilers about what it's about, but there are conversations about grief and how you move on as like a teenager when you're not really experienced enough in life to be able to handle grief. And yet these things do happen and it's part of life. That made it my favorite book of hers. So even though Better Than the Movies is Lynn Painter's most well-known book, I actually do have The Do-Over as my favorite. Like, I've memorized entire passages from this book because I also have felt a lot of grief in my life. And as a young person, you don't feel equipped to deal with that because your brain isn't fully baked yet. Your frontal lobe's not done cooking in the easy bake oven. And so books like this really help you process what you're going through. And then around the time that The Do-Over came out, we also got another fake dating book, but in a different way. This is fake dating with a goal, much like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I will stand by that movie until the cows come home. This is Betting on You. And this is in no way an insult, my least favorite Lynn Painter book out of all of hers. Just because I didn't quite relate to the characters as much. I had a harder time getting with the storyline, and also it seemed a little bit more risque for a teen book than I was maybe comfortable with, and that's a very personal taste issue. But that's me. I don't love a ton of like physical chemistry scenes. I'm into more emotional chemistry, banter, a bit more lighthearted. That's my area. The first time Bailey meets Charlie, he is the worst. While moving to Omaha after her parents' sudden divorce, Bailey finds herself trapped for 10 hours with a cynical and obnoxiously opinionated stranger, the polar opposite of her careful, well-behaved, cheery temperament. So imagine her surprise when years later, Charlie turns out to be her coworker at her new job. But this time around, they find themselves talking comfortably and even laughing. Still, they agree they can't stand each other, and when they witness two of their coworkers flirting, their commentary on the moment spirals into a bet. Charlie insists that members of the opposite sex can't just be friends, much like when Harry met Sally, and Bailey is determined to prove him wrong. Amidst all their bickering and playful banter, Charlie works to deflect the feelings he's developed for Bailey. He is terrified to lose her if his crush becomes known, and what doesn't help his agenda is Bailey and Charlie fake dating in order to disrupt the annoying pleasantries between Bailey's mom and her mom's new boyfriend. Soon, what Charlie was hoping to avoid becomes a reality as Bailey starts to see him as not only a friend, but someone who makes her hands shake and her heart race. But Charlie has a secret that involves Bailey and another bet Charlie may have made. Can the two make a real go of things, or has Charlie's secret doomed them before they can even start? But it's fake dating with the purpose of like, we're trying to break up another couple, or we have a bet with our friends, but then there's a secondary plot going with one of the characters where he had a bet. And it also has a big redemption plot as well. So if you have a bet with your friends behind someone's back, how do you recover from keeping secrets with someone? How do you recover lying to someone early on in a relationship? Is your whole relationship built off of lies, or is there truth to their personality? And it's just endless layering that Lynn Painter builds. And it's comforting because the teenagers love these kinds of themes over and over again. I say that, I'm 20. I'm like barely not a teenager. And Charlie and Bailey are my least favorite couple of hers, but it is a book that I still see all over my Pinterest and Tumblr pages. These are my hardcovers. I don't have all the Lynn Painter books in the same edition, sadly. But Nothing Like the Movies kind of reverts the trope. So it's when the rom-com goes wrong kind of thing. And this is when Wes and Liz are in college. So this is the sequel to Better Than the Movies. And Wes is trying to win Liz back. And he's made mistakes and he's ghosted her sometimes and they broke up and then she meets other guys and they're in college and their careers are really blossoming and he plays baseball now. And then she's doing the social media for the baseball team. So because the first book is like when the rom-coms come together and when your life looks like a rom-com, how do you deal with what happens after perfection? and that's the sequel, is what happens when everything falls apart. So that is better than the movies, and then nothing like the movies is accepting that reality is different. And you can't plan for your reality to be perfect. And I think that resonates with a lot of perfectionists, much like myself. Life is going to be messy. Life is going to inevitably go out of your way down a train hole, and you are not going to know what's going on most of the time. And specifically in college, this is very relatable because in college, it is the biggest period with the most massive amount of growth in the shortest amount of time. So it is one of the most formative experiences of your life is college. And it's only 4 years, and every semester so much happens to like stretch your brain that you are a completely different person semester to semester, at least for me. And this book reflects that because they've spent years apart and then they have to come back to each other. And how do they do that? And it's kind of an evolution of the rom-com. So it's like what a sequel to a lot of these rom-coms would be later on. Her latest book, released in 2025, is Lynn Painter's Fake Skating, which is my second favorite of hers, maybe even first favorite, depending on the day. But Fake Skating is like fake dating, but with hockey romance. So specifically with the recent release of like Off Campus and all the sports romances that are going on, Fake Skating kind of was the predecessor to Off Campus. So I like to say that like Off Campus is based off of Lynn Painter, even though obviously that had its own book series as well. Danny, and I believe his name is Alex. Yes, Danny and Alec were inseparable as children, but then she moves away. And when they were kids, she is the very outspoken one. And then she goes through a lot of trauma in her life, and then she becomes very closed off. And he is the uber popular hockey player at their school. And she becomes like the equipment manager, I think. And he has to help her get out of her shell now, which is very weird because the power dynamic has shifted in their relationship. And this is one of my favorites because it talks a lot about personality differences as you grow up. Don't know if they're going to end up together because they are so different. And then it becomes about how do you accept that you've grown as a person, even if you're not going to end up with that person. And much like the Olivia Rodrigo song, nothing is going to be the cure for the problems that you have. So if you've been dealing with trauma from your childhood, or if, much like the guy main character in this Alec, because it is, I believe, split perspective, which is another great trope that I love. Love a split perspective book. But he's been dealing with a lot of pressure from his parents. He feels a lot of guilt because he's gotten in some accidents and run up money in the family. And so how do you deal with the guilt from that when you're putting it on your partner, when you're expecting a relationship to fix things? And there's all these questions that the book kind of leaves unanswered at the end because a lot of these stories interweave where people are neighbors or different characters or cousins from different books. And so there's some crossover with like Betting on You, and I think nothing like the movies. Like I think the characters, Alec and Wes, are cousins or distant neighbors or relatives. But these are all of her books. There's kind of a lot of them, and I have these proudly on my shelf. They are my favorites. And comment down below your favorite Lynn Painter book. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Grace, and make sure to follow and subscribe at Grace.Boughton Daily to see more book reviews, more hot takes of mine, and some vlogs as well when I feel up to filming them, because they're kind of a lot of work. But that was Lynn Painter's body of work and how she has been resetting the publishing industry to follow the 2000s themes that we all love, the rom-coms, and kind of reinventing the wheel and being a huge inspiration to other authors in the YA romance genre. So comment your favorite Lynn Painter book down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!